It was just past midnight when David noticed the figure by the roadside. Rain poured in heavy sheets, and the lonely stretch of highway looked endless in the dark. The figure raised one arm slowly, thumb pointing towards the road. Against his better judgment, David slowed down and pulled over. A young woman stepped into the glow of the headlights. She wore a pale dress soaked from the rain, and her hair clung to her cheeks like strands of seaweed. She did not speak as she slipped into the passenger seat. Her skin was cold, and her eyes stared straight ahead, fixed on something beyond the windshield. "Where are you headed?" David asked, trying to sound casual. "Willow Bridge," she whispered, her voice thin and trembling. David nodded and started driving. The silence between them felt heavy. The rain hammered against the roof and the wipers squealed with every pass. David glanced at her now and then, but she never turned her head. "Rough night to be walking," he said. She did not answer. A few minutes later she whispered, "Thank you." He frowned. "For what?" Her lips trembled for stopping. No one stops anymore. David felt a chill creep up his spine. Something about her words felt strange, too final. As they approached the next bend, the woman suddenly stiffened. "Slow down," she said, panic lacing her voice. "Please slow down." David eased off the gas. "What's wrong?" he asked. She stared at the curve ahead. "This is where it happened." The words sent a shiver through him. He looked at her, but she wasn't looking back. Her eyes were locked on the guardrail and the small wooden cross planted beside it. A few wilted lilies clung to the base, soaked by the rain. David's heart pounded. What happened here? He asked. The woman took a deep breath, as if answering required strength. "I was coming home one night," she whispered. "It was raining like this. I was angry, distracted. I missed the curve." Her voice broke, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. "I never made it home." David stared at her, confusion mixing with dread. "What do you mean?" She turned to him for the first time, and he felt his blood run cold. Her eyes were distant, empty, as though they belonged to someone looking through him rather than at him. "I died here," she said, "and I never stopped walking." The temperature in the car dropped sharply. David's breath fogged the windshield and the engine sputtered. He looked at the seat beside him. It was empty. The woman was gone. Only the faint scent of rain lingered. Panic surged through him. He slammed on the brakes and stumbled out into the downpour. The road was deserted. The cross by the guardrail was the only sign of life. As he walked toward it, something caught his eye. Draped over the wooden post was a pale ribbon tied into a knot. It fluttered gently despite the heavy rain. David touched it, and a cold shock shot through his fingers. He stumbled back, heart racing. Back in the car, his mind spun. He tried to convince himself it was exhaustion, a trick of the storm, but deep down he knew the truth. He had not picked up a living woman. He had given a ghost a ride back to the place she could never leave. Weeks later, he drove the same road again. The rain fell just as hard, and the lilies at the guardrail were fresh. And though he told himself not to look, he slowed down near the bend. There in the corner of his eye stood a figure in a pale dress, thumb raised, eyes empty and waiting. He gripped the steering wheel tighter and pressed the gas, but the urge to stop tugged at him like a whisper. Some nights he swears he sees her in his rearview mirror, sitting silently in the back seat, staring out into the rain. And sometimes when the night is quiet enough, he hears her voice again, soft and broken. "Thank you for stopping."
They say the mirror game began as a dare among teenagers in a forgotten town. It was supposed to be harmless, just another late-night thrill. But those who speak of it now say that once you begin the ritual, it never truly ends. Mark had heard the story a dozen times, but never believed it. On a cold autumn night, with nothing but boredom and bravado fueling him, he decided to try it. He gathered everything the legend demanded: a single candle, a mirror taller than himself, and a locked, dark room where no sound could enter. The instructions were simple but unsettling. Light the candle at midnight. Stand before the mirror. Do not blink. Do not speak. And whatever you do, do not look away. As the clock struck midnight, Mark followed the steps. He placed the mirror against the wall, turned off every light, and lit the candle. Shadows clung to the corners of the room, and the dim flame painted his reflection in soft, trembling orange. At first, it was almost disappointing. He felt foolish staring into his own eyes. Minutes passed in silence, and nothing happened. But then he noticed a small, almost imperceptible difference: his reflection's smile. Mark wasn't smiling, but the version of him in the mirror was slowly, deliberately. The reflection's lips curled into a grin that didn't belong to him. Mark blinked and shook his head, trying to convince himself he imagined it. But when he looked again, the smile was wider, teeth gleamed faintly in the candlelight. The reflection tilted its head to the side, though Mark stood perfectly still. A chill crawled up his spine. He stepped back, but the reflection did not. It stayed pressed close to the glass, eyes fixed on him. That was when the rules of the game returned to him, words whispered in the back of his mind. Do not look away. Do not speak. Mark froze, terrified that breaking the ritual would make things worse. The reflection raised a hand slowly and placed it against the inside of the glass. Mark felt a sudden pulse of cold against his own palm, though he hadn't moved. Then, without warning, the candle flickered and died. Darkness swallowed the room. Mark's breath caught in his throat. He could still see the faint outline of the mirror glowing slightly as if lit from behind. And then, a whisper. It came from the other side of the glass. I see you, it breathed. Now let me out. Mark stumbled backward, heart pounding. He reached for the door, but the handle wouldn't turn. It was as if someone was holding it from the other side. Stop. The voice hissed. It's rude to leave before the game is over. When the candle relit itself impossibly on its own, Mark saw that the reflection was gone, the mirror was empty. He stared into the glass and saw only the dim flicker of the flame in the dark room behind him. A moment later, a cold hand touched his shoulder. Mark spun around, nothing. But when he looked back, his reflection had returned. Only now it was no longer mimicking his movements. It was closer, pressed against the inside of the mirror as if straining to push through. And behind it, faint shapes moved in the darkness. Too many eyes. Too many smiles. Mark screamed and threw the candle at the mirror. The glass shattered, spilling shards across the floor. For a moment, silence. Then from the largest shard, a single eye blinked. Mark ran from the room and never went back. But every mirror in his house has felt wrong since that night. Reflections linger half a second too long. Sometimes they smile when he doesn't. And once, just once, he woke in the night to see someone standing at the foot of his bed. Someone who looked exactly like him, grinning in the dark. They say the mirror game is not a ritual you can end. Breaking the glass only frees what was already waiting. And if one night you wake and see your reflection standing in the room with you, it's already too late. You played. And now, the mirror wants to finish the game.
It was during a business trip that Laura first heard about the room that should not exist. She was staying in an old hotel that had once been a private mansion, the kind of place where the wallpaper still smelled faintly of smoke and secrets. The man at the front desk was polite but nervous, warning her that some parts of the building were under renovation and not to wander at night. Laura laughed it off. After all, she was only staying 2 nights, but on her second evening, restless and unable to sleep, she decided to explore. The corridors were dimly lit, their carpet worn thin by a century of footsteps. The further she walked, the quieter everything became. The hum of the elevator faded. Even the rain outside seemed to hush itself. At the end of one hallway, she noticed something strange, a door with no number. It wasn't on the hotel map, and she could have sworn it hadn't been there earlier. Curiosity won over caution. She tried the handle. It turned without resistance. Inside was a perfectly ordinary room, a single bed with crisp white sheets, a desk with a small lamp, and a window that overlooked the dark street below. The only odd thing was the air. It felt too still, too cold. Laura stepped inside, intending to leave after a quick look, but the door clicked shut behind her. She turned the handle. It didn't budge. The lamp flickered, then steadied. Hello? She called, half expecting a staff member to appear. Silence. Something moved in the corner of her vision, a shadow, long and thin, slipping across the wall, though nothing stood between her and the light. The window showed the street, but it looked wrong. Older somehow, the lamppost replaced by gaslights, the cars gone. A chill settled over her as she realized the room itself felt displaced. She picked up the phone on the desk, dead. The line wasn't even connected. Panic rising, she pounded on the door. Help! Her voice vanished into the walls as if swallowed. Then came the whisper. No one checks this floor anymore. Laura spun around. The room was empty. Who's there? She demanded. No answer. Only the whisper again, closer this time. They built over it. They forgot we were here. The lamp flickered again and went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Laura's heart hammered. She fumbled for the door handle, but it was gone. Her hands brushed smooth wall where the door had been. She stumbled backward and collided with the bed. It was no longer neatly made. The sheets were stained dark and smelled of rot. Something cold brushed her ankle. She bolted toward the window, but where the glass had been, there was now a brick wall. The room was sealing itself around her. Please, she whispered, voice trembling. I just want to leave. The whisper became many, overlapping, rising and falling like a breath too close to her ear. We all wanted to leave. Shape-shifted in the darkness, she felt them more than she saw them. A presence just beyond reach, circling her. The cold deepened until her breath hung in the air. She pressed herself against the wall, sobbing, someone help me. And then, just as suddenly as it had vanished, the door returned. It stood open, the hallway beyond it silent and empty. Laura didn't hesitate. She ran. She didn't stop until she was back in her room, locking the door behind her and collapsing against it. She barely slept that night.
and at dawn she packed and left without checking out. Later she called the hotel, trying to explain. The manager listened patiently and then said something that chilled her blood. "There is no door at the end of that hallway," he said. "There hasn't been for decades. That part of the building was sealed after a fire in the early 1900s. Several guests died in a room there. It doesn't exist anymore." Laura never returned. But sometimes when she closes her eyes, she feels that cold air against her skin again and hears the whisper. "They forgot we were here." And deep down she knows the truth. The room still exists, waiting for someone curious enough to open a door that shouldn't be there.
It was a quiet night in late autumn when Daniel decided to walk home instead of taking the bus. The streets were empty, the air cold enough to sting his cheeks, and the only sound was the faint hum of the city far away. He liked the silence. It was comforting, until he saw the man. At first, Daniel barely noticed him. Just a tall, thin figure standing under a street light across the road. The man was dressed in an old-fashioned suit, far too formal for this part of town. What caught Daniel's attention wasn't the clothes, though. It was the way the man was smiling. A wide, exaggerated grin stretched across his face, frozen and too perfect, as if carved there. Daniel looked away and kept walking. A few moments later, curiosity got the better of him and he glanced back. The man was still there, only now he was closer, still under a light, still smiling, still staring directly at him. Daniel's pulse quickened. Maybe the man just happened to be walking the same direction. He sped up. So did the man. Daniel turned onto a side street, telling himself he was imagining things. But when he looked over his shoulder, the smiling man had turned too. The distance between them was shrinking. His steps were strange, almost playful, like someone skipping to a tune only he could hear. And still, that terrible smile never faded. It was stretched too wide, showing too many teeth, eyes fixed and unblinking. Daniel's breath came faster. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "It's just some guy." But deep down, something primal told him to run. He quickened his pace, and so did the man. A block later, Daniel broke into a jog. The man followed, not running, but gliding forward in those strange, lurching steps. He wasn't chasing. He was playing by the time Daniel reached his own street. Panic had taken over. He sprinted the last stretch, fumbling his keys as he reached his building. Heart hammering, he risked one last glance down the street. The smiling man stood beneath a flickering street lamp, still as a statue. He hadn't followed Daniel all the way, but he was watching. That awful grin gleamed white in the darkness. Daniel stumbled inside and slammed the door behind him. He laughed nervously at how shaken he felt. "It's fine," he whispered. "Just a weirdo." But later that night, as he lay in bed, Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Nice run." He froze. The next message followed seconds later. "We should do it again sometime." He blocked the number immediately, but sleep never came. Over the next few nights, Daniel saw him again, always at a distance, always under a light, always smiling. Sometimes he would wave slowly, as if they shared a private joke. Other times he just stared. Daniel stopped taking his evening walks. He changed his route to work. He told himself the man would lose interest. But the text kept coming. "Missed you last night. You look tired this morning. Don't worry, I'll wait." One night, Daniel woke to the sound of tapping at his window. He lived on the 5th floor, heart racing. He crept toward the curtains and pulled them back. There was no one there, only the empty street below. But on the glass, written in the condensation, was a single word:
smile. Daniel doesn't walk alone anymore. He doesn't answer unknown numbers. And yet, sometimes when the streetlights flicker outside his apartment, he swears he sees a figure on the corner, tall, thin, motionless, and always smiling. They say the smiling man chooses his targets randomly. He doesn't speak, he doesn't touch, he just watches. And once he's noticed you, he never truly leaves. So if you're ever alone on a quiet street and see someone standing under a light with a grin too wide to be real, don't look back. Because once you do, the game has already begun.